GM, good morning. Welcome to the Milk Road Show, the daily crypto show where we cut the crust off your crypto sandwich. I'm your host, Jay Hamilton, and today we're joined by Daniel Fogg, CEO of Rootstock Labs, one of the leading L2s built on Bitcoin. Now, you're probably thinking, why does Bitcoin need L2s? Well, that's what this conversation is all about. Daniel's going to give us a history lesson of Bitcoin in order to understand why L2s, or as Daniel prefers to call them, side chains, are necessary for Bitcoin. Just 6 years ago, there was only 2 side chains on Bitcoin. Today, there's over 50, all with the aim of turning Bitcoin into a smart contract platform that can rival Ethereum or Solana. And in this fascinating conversation, Daniel is going to help you decide if Bitcoin sidechains are something you should be paying attention to for your portfolio. Now, before we jump in, we are so close to 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I am so pumped, and I know you are too, because the more subs we get, the more people we can bring into crypto in a safe way. So if you're not already subscribed, make sure you smash that subscribe button on YouTube today. And if you do, you could win some super sweet prizes worth hundreds of dollars. So don't wait, subscribe now. Also, you're going to want to make sure you check out our friends over at Gemini. Discover Gemini, the US-based exchange built for new and advanced traders. As a special welcome gift, they are offering new customers $15 in Bitcoin just for trading. At Gemini, security is the top priority. As a licensed full reserve exchange and custodian, your assets are well protected. Plus, they offer cutting-edge security features like passkeys to keep your accounts safe. This exchange is setting the standard for compliance and innovation so you can trade with confidence. Head over to gemini.com/milkroad and start trading today to earn your $15 in Bitcoin. Sign up now and get ready to join the trading fun. Daniel, welcome to the Milk Road Show.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Awesome. Super excited to have you. I think I got to start with what might seem like a rather obvious question to you, but is not going to be so obvious to our listeners and maybe to a lot of people out who aren't in the space every day, which is, why does Bitcoin need L2s when to most people, Bitcoin is digital gold and a store of value, not a smart contract platform?
Yeah, totally. So Bitcoin's core use case is storing value in a decentralized, global, permissionless way. But really, that is only just the beginning. If you can store value and transfer value, that is essentially a storage and payment mechanism that everybody can connect into. But that's not a global financial system. It's not an economy. It's just one component of it. And so what L2s try to do is take that store of value and give it utility beyond just storage. And it does that. There are many different ways you do that, but essentially what we do at Rootstock Labs with Rootstock and what other L2s do in different forms and different ways is to use the computational and cryptographic power of the Bitcoin network itself, not Bitcoin the asset, but the computational power from all of the miners to secure a second network. And that's really what an L2 is. It's a second network, a side chain where it is in some way linked or anchored to the Bitcoin main chain as well.
Daniel, let's maybe give everybody a little bit of a history lesson to understand the Bitcoin and then the Bitcoin L2 landscape. Can you kind of take us back through what has happened and how we got to where we are today?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a forum that was set up by Satoshi Nakamoto called Bitcoin Talks. And I think in 2011, there was a post by Satoshi which talked about the need for L2s on Bitcoin. Then he didn't call them L2s. I think he might have called them sidechains at the time, but essentially a mechanism where you can do more complex interactions and process. Again, he wasn't referencing smart contracts, but hinting in that direction without congesting the main chain, using the computational power, using the power that the Bitcoin miners are using to do the cryptographic hashing that you need to secure Bitcoin, and using that and recycling it for a second network. So that was originally where the idea came from. And so this was to kind of actively discussed, is something else required in addition to Bitcoin to scale Bitcoin beyond just the network itself? And there's a history of Rootstock here, which is which is important because Rootstock was the first Bitcoin sidechain. So a lot of the early work that the Rootstock team did kind of set the groundwork. But there's some kind of key players here. I mean, the first one really is Nick Szabo, who's a legend in the space and was one of the big inspirational factors for the Rootstock founding team to build Rootstock. Another one was Adam Back. So Adam's a legendary cryptographer, featured, in popular culture, most recently in the HBO documentary. Definitely not Satoshi Nakamoto.
Thanks for confirming.
No problem. But even if he was, I wouldn't say if I knew. And the team at Blockstream, I think at that time called Liquid, so what became the Liquid network, they proposed a way that you could lock Bitcoin on the Bitcoin network and then unlock a pegged or identical version, if you will, of Bitcoin on a secondary network. And then there was, that was referred to as a federated peg. And so there was a bunch of different kind of pieces and ideas, and essentially it took Sergio and Adrian, Diego, Gabriel, and the team who were the kind of early founders of Rootstock to kind of piece this all together and say, what if we and another missing piece, really important one, which was the creation of Ethereum. Mm-hmm. So you've got Vitalik in the Ethereum team, you've got Adam Back, with Liquid. And then you've got, Nick Szabo as the kind of influence, and obviously Satoshi Nakamoto is the original idea. And essentially what the Rootstock Labs team did was piece all this together and say, okay, so what if we forked Ethereum to create a smart contract platform? We kept the proof of work mechanism from Bitcoin and we recycled the hash rate from Bitcoin to secure the second network. We created a bridge between Bitcoin and the second network using the stuff that Adam Back designed. And we brought all this together. What do you get? Mm-hmm. So what you get is you get the best of both worlds. You get the store of value and the security and the permissionless, decentralized, trustless nature of Bitcoin, along with the programmability, the composability that a smart contract platform, the first smart contract platform of any scale that Ethereum created. And Rootstock really is the two combined. Now, that's what Rootstock is, and Rootstock was the first. It was called a sidechain at the time, shortly after Liquid launched. So Liquid produced the white paper, which inspired some of the work that we did. We managed to launch first. That's not to take anything away from them, but these things often are a race. But I think the L2 term is helpful and unhelpful here, right? So who were the first sidechains in L2s? Well, the big four are Rootstock, Liquid, Lightning, and Stacks. These are the kind of four big ones. But if you actually look at them, they're all very different. Rootstock's a EVM compatible sidechain using merge mining. Liquid is I believe, a permissioned private chain of forms, which is, I believe, heavily used by institutions. Lightning is a state channel payments network, and Stacks uses a very different consensus mechanism. And while it's an open network, it's been heavily used for ordinals and NFTs and other kind of use cases. So you've got four very different architectures, very different ways of scaling Bitcoin. So this is important because an L2 in Bitcoin is a catch-all term for anything that helps scale Bitcoin. And you can choose any different direction. But it's a term that's been ported over from Ethereum. And in Ethereum, an L2 is something very specific. So yeah, I think this is kind of like because the term Bitcoin L2 really emerged in 2022. And I think it's been really helpful because it's allowed people from outside of the Bitcoin world to understand what's going on with these scaling mechanisms. But one thing I can say for sure is that, if you took maybe the four original L2s on Bitcoin and then something like 5 or 6 of the newest ones, they're all radically different. They all do very different things. They're all trying to scale Bitcoin, but they're doing it in very different ways. So it's both a helpful term because it explains what these scaling mechanisms are, but it's also unhelpful because you're really often comparing apples to oranges. I mean, Rootstock and Lightning are, completely different things used for completely different purposes.
Is there a better term that we should use?
Yeah, so the term we originally used was the Bitcoin sidechain. Something that we've been doing more and more is talking about true Bitcoin L2s. And I can maybe get into that. I think this is a helpful and unhelpful debate. It's helpful because it helps people understand this fast-moving space. And that matters because you're dealing in decentralized permissionless technology. People are taking risks with their assets. They kind of need to know what's going on. And it requires terminology and analogy and research to really understand that. But it's unhelpful because really you're just categorizing away everything. And that can sometimes become, it's a little bit like with music genres, like how helpful is it to subdivide every artist into a subgenre? It's kind of more the sort of thing that a journalist or an aficionado would find value in, but for the Bitcoin holder on the street, it kind of doesn't matter so much. So, but I think maybe if it's helpful, I'd love to give you like a definition that we think about when we talk about a true Bitcoin L2. So in simple terms, and what Rootstock is a network that has a cryptographic, economic, and monetary link directly back to Bitcoin. So what do I mean by that? So firstly, cryptographic links. So all of the blocks and all of the transactions on the sidechain are hashed into the Bitcoin main chain itself. That is, for a Bitcoin block where Rootstock or another sidechain has been merge mined or has somehow hashed on the network, there is evidence of it. You can see that the hashing power has been used to anchor the two. So you're inheriting the security architecture, you're inheriting the proof of work consensus mechanism, and you're inheriting, all of the trust assumptions that come along with that. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the economic alignment. Are you supporting, is the sidechain supporting the Bitcoin network? So in the case of Rootstock, 79% of all of the transaction fees for Rootstock are paid out to the Bitcoin merge miners automatically. So that means that the Bitcoin miners have a secondary revenue stream. It's supporting the Bitcoin model. It is additive to the economic model of this decentralized organization, if you will. And then the third thing is monetary alignment. So in Rootstock, Bitcoin is king. There was no pre-mined token. There's no competing money token. So we haven't launched a token which intends to compete with Bitcoin for monetary dominance. And Bitcoin is the native gas token. So like with Ethereum, you'd use ETH to pay gas. In Rootstock, you pay Bitcoin to pay gas. This is Rootstock, and this is, we consider a true Bitcoin L2. You could look, and there are other more technical definitions, but you could look at Lightning through a similar characteristic. It's supporting the Bitcoin miners and the Bitcoin network by generating increased transaction volume on the network. It uses Bitcoin, so it's not competing with Bitcoin in any way. And it's it's running on a state channel network, which is cryptographically anchored into Bitcoin. So it's a genuine Bitcoin L2. It's a genuine sidechain. So yeah, that's how we tend to look at it. And I think where things get a little bit more tasty is when you look at some of the newer L2s that have emerged in the last few years, because some of them do not meet this definition. They have tokens that will launch, compete monetarily with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is not the native gas token. Maybe they don't use the Bitcoin proof of work consensus mechanism. They use proof of stake. Maybe they're using wrapped Bitcoin, so they're reliant on a custodian. There's lots of different sort of types out there. This is not to say that these can't work and these can't be helpful in scaling Bitcoin. But I do think that when, if you think about the principles on which Bitcoin was created and what I think of the majority of people, even those that are, perhaps less aware of what's going on with Bitcoin, when they hold it, it represents something to them. This is decentralized, it's trustless, it's basically unstoppable. That kind of means something. As you take that Bitcoin off the Bitcoin main chain and into an L2, I think that's where these definitions of a true sidechain start to matter, because of course those trust assumptions are going to change slightly, but how far away from Bitcoin are you going? How much risk are you taking? What is this architecture that you're stepping into? How long has this chain been live, etc.? And I think those kind of questions are where these categorizations matter, and where there's some challenges in the growing L2 space.
Mm-hmm. Well, especially when, as you said, there is such a strong connection for everybody's demand for Bitcoin being tied to its decentralization and its security and its being outside of the system that we are all trying to change. And I'm glad you explained that, because I, even coming into this conversation, was unsure of if all these side chains or L2s or true L2s, whichever language we use, are secure and decentralized in the way that Bitcoin is. And so what I'm hearing is that some of them are and some of them aren't.
So, even Rootstock is not.
Right.
There is nothing that has even approached the level of security and decentralization of Bitcoin. So there's always going to be a drop-off, but how far is that drop-off? And how much connection and linkage is there back to Bitcoin? And that's the question that really matters. And that's what a lot of this debate around L2s is really about. And, this matters because, in the kind of war for attention in crypto, some of these technical details get lost in kind of hyperbolic marketing. And I think, it's important to kind of ground everybody and say, there's, you've got to be aware of this stuff. What do you want to trust your Bitcoin outside the Bitcoin network on with a side chain that's economically and cryptographically linked to Bitcoin, has been up and running for 6.5 years, was built off some of the founding principles of what Bitcoin was for. or do you want to move your Bitcoin into something that was launched 6 months ago, is kind of, built off the back of an op stack or a Polygon sidechain or something, and, doesn't really use Bitcoin. It uses some sort of synthetic form and all this. And
seems like a pretty obvious answer.
Yeah. And that's okay. I mean, it's okay if people want to, go to those places. That's totally fine. It's their choice. But I think that a lot of that distinction does get lost in the marketing hype.
So let's talk a little bit of adoption. These chains have been around, Rootstock, Lightning, a few of the ones that you mentioned, for several years, 6 years, but adoption has been very slow.
Right.
Why is adoption so
slow?
So
it's a really good question. So I can talk very specifically from Rootstock's perspective, but I have sort of theories on what's going on elsewhere. So Rootstock launched in 2018. My exact history of when the bull and bear markets landed is always a bit vague, but I remember the mania in 2017. So I can imagine that from memory, the crash was 18 and 19, and that was the winter. And so we launched a network in the depths of winter. And I think, if you think about Lightning was also 2018, I think Liquid 2019, if I'm not mistaken. So they were all launching in winter. Now, if you zoom out and you think from a hype cycle perspective, that actually is probably a good thing and makes sense. It's generally how this stuff tends to shake out. You launch in the winter when no one's paying attention, you build and build and build. And then when the next wave comes, you're prepared for it. So I think that's the first thing. It was a market moment that was not favorable for any crypto. The second thing to bear in mind is that, and I think this kind of really is often misunderstood, which is that building and scaling an ecosystem, which is what the team at Rootstock Labs is trying to do off the back of Rootstock, this decentralized network, is slow, hard, difficult, complex, very enjoyable, very interesting, very challenging, very rewarding work. And it takes time. It takes capital, and it takes lots of different approaches, and it takes, the success and failure of not just one team, but tens, if not hundreds of teams building on that network. And so it's a very, you're scaling a network. Scaling networks from the internet through to social media networks, it's tricky. So I think that's kind of the other thing I'd say, like, these things take time. And, all the L2s that are launching at the moment, both the Bitcoin L2s and the L2s that are launching on Ethereum, I wish them the best of luck. But my view on this is really success in building a decentralized network is about longevity and survival. Can you stick around and keep building year in, year out? That is really the measure of whether this is going to succeed. And 6.5 years going strong. The other thing I'd kind of more from a kind of philosophical or positioning perspective is what Rootstock offers and other Bitcoin sidechains also offer is a kind of new hybrid. Right. So I positioned Rootstock as the best of both worlds. I think, detractors in both the Ethereum and Bitcoin world would probably see it as the opposite, as the worst of both worlds. Right. And I think that narrative, we really struggled with that. The Bitcoiners originally were very skeptical of us because we were not maximalist enough. And the Ethereum crowd, didn't, we were not degen and kind of and open and creative enough, maybe. I don't know. So we kind of were not, we were kind of nobody's friend and everyone's enemy. And I think that what we saw, there was two things that really broke that. The first one is the kind of the DeFi summer. So, when the DeFi summer was kind of raging during COVID in 2020, 2021, we saw quite a significant increase in demand and adoption on Rootstock for people and builders looking to do DeFi, but Bitcoin DeFi. We saw some of the first projects really launching, being successful, like Sovereign, which is a DeFi platform, SOVRYN, and Money on Chain, the first Bitcoin collateralized stablecoin, all launched in that era. So we saw the first innovators doing pure Bitcoin DeFi on a Bitcoin L2 launching. And then the kind of second phase, really, where we saw a big growth and adoption was maybe like early 2023, when this narrative around Bitcoin L2s started up. There was a technology trigger, which is the advent of zero knowledge rollups, the possibility that might be something you could try on Bitcoin. Then, the advent of, potential around OpCat. So this is getting a little bit technical, but the potential around OpCat on Bitcoin, which is a mechanism where you can essentially, anchor into Bitcoin, anchor smart contracts into Bitcoin and potentially do a zero knowledge verification. That's a hard fork of Bitcoin that would be required for that. And I believe it's also something, I think OpCat is something that Satoshi originally built and was in Bitcoin, but was then pulled out, I think 2011, 2012, that provides concatenation. But anyway, long story short, that creates a path for doing rollups on Bitcoin. And then something called BitVM, which was a computational framework designed by Robin Linus in late 2023. So all of these things created a pathway where you might be able to build a smart contract platform anchored into the Bitcoin network without doing an EVM fork or something like that, or build a better bridge to Bitcoin, which is something we're trying to do. And then there was a narrative shift as well. And I've got to give credit here to the Stacks ecosystem, who did quite a lot of good work here, but others as well. I think there was, it was the kind of, as the L2 moment was starting to happen on Ethereum, there was this reflection about like, okay, but can you scale Bitcoin in a similar way? And this L2 narrative started building. And then, to be honest, like late 2023, early 2024, it just took off. And the scale of growth we've seen on Rootstock over the last 12 months has been phenomenal. We've seen more protocol integrations, more TVL increase, more transaction volume increase in the last 12 months than like the previous 5 years combined. So it's just taking off. There's still challenges. It's still early, but there is real genuine interest and real demand. And this is also evidenced by the number of L2s that have launched in the last 12 months. So, teams like BitLayer, like Core, like Merlin, there are many others. There's ones like Bob, which launched this year, built on Bitcoin. And I think something like 80 Bitcoin L2 projects, which are slated to launch in the next few years. So there is a huge growth here, which, as the builders of the first L2, we're like it's amazing. And
like
it's kind of
proud parent.
Yeah, I guess so. But also, proud, kind of slightly stunned, kind of like, oh, okay, we were right. It was going to work. We were just really early, and I think you often see that, right? They say, what is it? You can either be first, best, or cheapest, I think is the kind of, and we were definitely the first. And that is great, but it comes with challenges as well. Partly that's many years trying to build adoption, not quite getting there, but now it's taking off.
So let's paint the picture of what is the vision or the end state that you would like to see for the Bitcoin network, assuming adoption. Let's just assume adoption happens. Who knows what the time frame is? I know you can't predict that, but what would the end state look like? What would be happening? What would the activity and the use cases? Would it look similar to what is happening on Ethereum and all of their L2s, rollups, et cetera? Is that the end state?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Yeah, so a way to think about this is 0.2% of all of the Bitcoin in circulation today is being used in DeFi. It's like a couple of hundred million. I can't remember the exact number, like 1 or 2 billion perhaps. It's a very, very, very small amount. It's a tiny amount. So why does this matter? Well, it matters because that means that 99.8% of all the Bitcoin that's in circulation is just doing what it was perhaps originally designed to do, which is to store value, but it's not really doing much else. It's essentially like people talk about digital gold. It's closer to kind of digital dollars stuffed under the mattress. That means, okay, so if it's increasing in value over time and it's, that's great. But it also means it kind of doesn't really have much more utility other than that. So the idea with L2s and like where we see the Bitcoin ecosystem going is that asset becomes interconnected with every other part of our financial system. It really isn't today. Try collateralizing a loan with Bitcoin. Try, buying a house with it. Try buying a car with it. Try buying, you can buy coffee with it and buy pizza with it, but it's a pain, right? And so all of that needs to be abstracted away in some way for it to become an asset which is in widespread use and widespread adoption. But in order to do that, you need a whole global financial and economic system be built up around it. And you certainly cannot do that just through the Bitcoin network. You need smart contract platforms and scaling layers to do that, and different, infinite numbers of applications and infrastructure building out. And today, the only way that's being done is through centralized custodians and centralized actors. People like Coinbase, for example, and maybe like Robinhood. And that's great. So you have access to the asset through those mechanisms, but it's really, it's not decentralized. You're basically just trusting a custodian and that's kind of fine. That's part of the plan, but it's not, I would argue it's not really scalable and it's not really in keeping with the original vision. So what we need, this is all to say, what we need to see is an entire ecosystem of applications being built up around Bitcoin, which interact with it, are connected to it, and mean that it can become part of everybody's daily lives globally. Now, that's the kind of obvious answer. But what does this mean? If you zoom out a little bit, I see Bitcoin as two things, really. It is a digital store of value, which is secured by a network. And it is also this absolutely remarkable distributed computation system, the most secure and unbreakable lock we have ever created. And today it's only being used to secure Bitcoin. What I think and what we think at Rootstock Labs is it could be used to secure every single part of our digital lives. And that goes way beyond just financial assets and value. It goes to, everything from your identity to your records, your private files. I mean, everything potentially. We're kind of like I kind of sometimes think of life in 2024 as like a frog slowly being boiled. The number of scams and cyber attacks and meltdowns that are happening all the time, we've just kind of got used to it. It's not getting better, it's going to get worse, because the benefit for hackers is getting bigger. As our lives become more and more digitally integrated, we're going to be making it more and more attractive for hackers to, and cyber criminals and state-backed cyber hackers to get access to our wealth and our lives and our identities and our private pictures and our whatever. So there's this kind of arms race, and it's running. And really there are lots of kind of mechanisms to prevent this, but one of them, which is only really in its infancy, is securing everything with the Bitcoin network. And so I think that is where we're going to go in the coming years. There are lots of other visions for where Bitcoin goes, but that you can hear those from other mouths. The one I'm most interested in is what we can do with this incredible computer to secure our future.
Wonderful. Daniel, thank you so much for joining us today and for so eloquently explaining a very technical thing to our audience. Everybody listening in, I want to know if you guys are interested in learning more about Bitcoin L2s. Are you just holding Bitcoin as a store of value? Curious to know what you guys think. Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you guys next time. Have a wicked awesome day.
As always, if you liked today's episode, please hit subscribe and make sure you follow us so you don't miss out on the next one. There's also a link in the description to our free 5-minute daily newsletter where we simplify crypto for you while making you laugh. And if you're willing to step up your crypto investing game, we're going to also leave a link for Milk Road Pro. You get access to our portfolio where you can see exactly what we are buying. This is your #1 resource to help you invest successfully in crypto. One final note, this show is for educational purposes only, and nothing we say is financial advice. Investing in crypto or any asset is risky, and you should never invest more than you can afford to lose. Thanks so much for listening in, my friends. Have a wicked awesome day.